The doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night when the rain was coming down like the sky had burst open. I know the exact time because I was sitting in my garage workshop, rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, and the clock on my workbench has those red digital numbers that burn into your retinas when you stare at them too long. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody visits Lennon Brasken after midnight unless their transmission just gave up the ghost on Route 9, and even then, most people wait until morning. But the doorbell kept ringing, insistent and demanding, like whoever was out there thought they owned the place. I wiped the grease off my hands with an old shop rag and walked through the house to the front door. The security camera I'd installed 6 months ago showed me exactly what I didn't want to see. Seren, my ex-wife, standing on my porch like a drowned cat. Her blonde hair was plastered to her skull, her expensive makeup running in dark streams down her cheeks, and her white designer jacket was soaked through. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was Mara and Kenzie, her two best friends, standing behind her with their phones out, recording everything. Both of them had those plastic rain covers over their devices, the kind you buy when you're planning to film something in bad weather. This wasn't some spontaneous visit. This was a production. "Lennon?" Seren called through the door, her voice carrying that particular note of desperation she used to reserve for when the credit card got declined at expensive restaurants. "I know you're in there. Please, I need to talk to you." I didn't move toward the door. Instead, I stood there in my hallway, watching her through the camera feed on my phone. She knocked again, harder this time, and I could see Mara adjusting her angle to get a better shot of Seren's performance. "I have nowhere else to go," Seren continued, and now she was really laying it on thick. "Please, just let me in. We need to talk." The last time we talked, she told me her ex-boyfriend Dex Gordon needed her more than I ever did. She said it while standing in this same hallway, with her suitcases already packed and his Dodge Charger idling in my driveway. She said I was holding her back, that Dex understood her ambitions in ways I never could. She said she was sorry, but not sorry enough to stick around for my response. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of silence, of blocked phone numbers and returned mail. 8 months of rebuilding my life without her constant criticism about my job, my clothes, my friends, my everything. 8 months of peace. And now, here she was, soaked and shivering, with her personal film crew ready to capture whatever drama she had planned. I picked up my phone and opened my email app, found the folder labeled Seren Legal Documents, and scrolled through until I located what I needed. The lease termination notice she'd signed when she moved out, along with the formal separation agreement our lawyers had drafted. I attached both documents to a new email. The recipients were simple: Richard and Patricia Caldwell, Seren's parents. People who had never particularly liked me, but who had raised their daughter to believe that actions have consequences. In the subject line, I typed, "Your daughter needs assistance, documentation attached." In the body of the email, I wrote, "Seren is currently at my residence requesting help. As per the attached legal documents, she terminated our relationship and chose to pursue other arrangements. I am forwarding this to you as her emergency contacts. The storage unit information for her remaining belongings is included." I hit send. Through the camera, I watched Seren's phone light up almost immediately. Then her mother was calling, and I could hear the ringtone even through the front door. Seren fumbled with the device, nearly dropping it in her panic to answer. "Mom?" Her voice was loud enough for me to hear clearly. "No, I'm not. It's complicated. I just need—" The conversation continued, but I could see from Seren's body language that it wasn't going the way she'd planned. Her shoulders slumped. Her free hand went to her forehead. Mara and Kenzie exchanged glances behind her, still recording, but looking less confident about whatever they'd thought would happen here. I walked to my desk and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, I placed a printed copy of the storage unit receipt, the lease termination notice, and a simple note with the address of the facility where her belongings had been moved 3 weeks after she left. I'd paid for 6 months in advance, which was more generous than she deserved, but less complicated than dealing with her lawyers. Opening the front door just wide enough to slide the envelope through, I said, "Everything you left behind is in Unit 47 at Secure Store on Hamilton Avenue. Your parents are expecting you." Seren's eyes went wide when she saw me. "Lennon, please just let me explain. Dex and I, things didn't work out the way I thought they would. I made a mistake." "Your mistake was thinking I'd be here when you got tired of your other options," I replied, keeping my voice level and calm. "I'm not." Kenzie, the one with the bigger phone and the ring light attachment, stepped closer. "This is so dramatic," she whispered to Mara, but not quietly enough. "Should we keep filming?" "Yes," Mara whispered back. "This is gold." But it wasn't gold, not the kind they were looking for anyway. They'd expected tears, begging, maybe some kind of emotional breakdown that would play well on their social media feeds. Instead, they got a man in work clothes calmly handing over paperwork and closing a door. "The storage unit is paid through December," I added. "After that, it's your responsibility." Seren tried to put her foot in the door, but I was already closing it. "Lennon, wait. We had something real. You know we did. I was confused, I was scared about the future, but I realize now that what we had was special." "What we had," I said through the narrowing gap, "was a marriage where you spent 3 years telling me I wasn't good enough. I heard you. Message received." I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Through the security camera, I watched Seren stand there for another 10 minutes, alternating between knocking and talking on the phone with her parents. Mara and Kenzie kept filming for the first few minutes, but as it became clear that nothing dramatic was going to happen, they started looking at each other with the kind of uncertainty that comes when your entertainment doesn't deliver. Finally, Seren walked back to the car. A silver Honda that I didn't recognize, probably a rental. Her friends followed, still holding their phones, but no longer recording. The car pulled out of my driveway and disappeared down the street, taking the circus with it. I went back to the garage and picked up the carburetor I'd been rebuilding. Mrs. Henderson needed her Buick running by Friday so she could drive to her grandson's graduation. That was a real problem with a real solution, the kind of work that made sense in a world where too many things didn't. The rain kept falling, washing the last traces of Seren's visit from my driveway, and I got back to work. I opened the shop at 7 a.m. sharp, same as every weekday for the past 12 years. Brasken Automotive sits on the corner of Pine and 3rd Street, in a building my father bought in 1987 when this part of town still had a future. The sign out front needs repainting, and the waiting area furniture came from a hotel that went out of business in 2003, but the work we do is honest, and our customers know it. Tate Morrison was already there when I arrived, leaning against his pickup truck with a coffee cup in one hand and his phone in the other. Tate's been my best mechanic for 8 years, ever since he got out of the Army and decided he'd rather fix engines than people. He's got the kind of steady hands that can thread a bolt in the dark and the kind of mouth that can make a sailor blush. But he's never let me down when it counted. "Morning, boss," he said, not looking up from his screen. "You might want to see this." He handed me his phone, and there it was, a video posted to something called TikTok at 1:23 a.m. The title read, "When Your Ex Won't Take You Back. Cringe." The thumbnail showed Seren standing on my porch, looking pathetic in the rain. I hit play and watched myself hand over the envelope through a crack in the door. The audio was surprisingly clear. Kenzie must have had one of those directional microphones that the serious social media people use. You could hear every word of our conversation, including Seren's attempts to explain herself and my responses. But the comments were what made it interesting. Instead of the sympathy Seren had probably expected, most of the viewers seemed to be on my side. Girl really thought she could come crawling back after leaving him for her ex? The audacity is unreal. He handled that perfectly. Why is she acting like the victim here? She left him. That man said, "Here's your stuff, bye," and I respect that energy. The video had been viewed 47,000 times since midnight. "Well," I said, handing the phone back to Tate, "that's not what I expected to wake up to." "Gets better," Tate said with a grin that meant trouble. "Check out what happened after they left your place." He scrolled to another video, this one posted by Mara at 2:15 a.m. The title was "Girl's Night Gone Wrong, Story Time." In it, Mara explained how they'd driven Seren to her parents' house, only to find Richard Caldwell waiting on the front porch with a printed copy of my email and a lecture about responsibility that lasted 20 minutes. Seren's dad basically told her she made her bed and now she had to lie in it, Mara said into the camera, her voice full of the kind of excitement that comes from being adjacent to drama without being responsible for it. He said if she wanted to leave a good man for her ex, that was her choice, but she couldn't expect everyone else to clean up the mess when it didn't work out. The video ended with Mara explaining that Seren had driven to a motel for the night and that the whole situation was just really awkward for everyone involved. "Your ex-wife's 15 minutes of fame isn't going the way she planned," Tate observed. "She's not my ex-wife," I corrected. "The divorce was finalized 4 months ago. She's just someone I used to know." Mrs. Henderson arrived at 8:30 to pick up her Buick, and I was grateful for the distraction of normal business. She paid in cash, tipped me an extra $20 for getting it done early, and told me her grandson was graduating with honors from community college. Real problems, real solutions, real life moving forward. But the phone kept ringing all morning with calls that had nothing to do with automotive repair. Friends who'd seen the videos, neighbors who wanted to know if I was okay, and 3 different reporters from local news stations who thought there might be a story in viral divorce drama. I told everyone the same thing. Seren and I were divorced, I wished her well, and I had no further comment. Then I went back to work. Around noon, my father showed up. Eli Brasken is 73 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and spent 30 years as a cop in this town before retiring to fish and complain about how everything was better when he was younger. He's also the only person I know who's never owned a smartphone and proud of it. "Heard there was some excitement at your place last night," he said, settling into the chair behind my desk like he still owned it. "Nothing I couldn't handle." "Good. Your mother always said that girl was trouble. Too much ambition, not enough character." My mother had been gone for 5 years, but Dad still quoted her like she was in the next room. It was his way of processing the world without her, and I'd learned not to correct him. "She made her choice," I said. "I just made sure she lived with it." "Smart. A man who doesn't respect himself can't expect anyone else to respect him either." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of Tate working under the hood of a Ford Explorer in the next bay. This was the life I'd built after Seren left. Predictable, honest, mine. But I knew it wasn't over. People like Seren don't give up after one public humiliation. They regroup, they strategize, and they come back with a different approach. The videos might have embarrassed her, but they'd also shown her exactly how much sympathy she wasn't going to get from the general public. That meant she'd try something else. Something more personal, more calculated. Something designed to hurt me in ways that wouldn't look bad on camera. I was right, of course. But I didn't know how right until 3 days later, when the real games began. The first sign of trouble came on Friday morning when Janet Kowalski canceled her appointment to have her transmission looked at. Janet had been bringing her cars to my shop for 15 years, ever since her husband died and left her with a 1998 Camry that needed more attention than a newborn baby. "I'm sorry, Lennon," she said over the phone, her voice tight with embarrassment. "I've decided to take it somewhere else." "Did I do something wrong, Mrs. Kowalski?" No, nothing like that. It's just, well, my daughter saw those videos online, and she thinks maybe it would be better if I found a different mechanic. You understand?" I understood perfectly. Someone had been making phone calls. The second cancellation came an hour later, then a third. By lunchtime, I'd lost 4 appointments and had 2 customers ask for their cars back before the work was finished. Tate found me in the office, staring at the appointment book that was suddenly looking a lot emptier than it had that morning. "What's going on, boss?" "Someone's been spreading stories." "What kind of stories?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Brasken Automotive." "Is this Lennon Brasken?" The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes." "This is Detective Maria Santos with the County Sheriff's Department. I need to ask you a few questions about a complaint that was filed against you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" "A woman named Seren Caldwell has alleged that you've been harassing her through social media and that she feels threatened by your behavior. She says you've been encouraging people online to target her with negative comments and that you have her personal belongings and are refusing to return them." I sat down hard in my desk chair. "Detective, I haven't contacted Seren in any way since our divorce was finalized. I don't even have social media accounts." "Can you prove that?" "I can give you my phone, my computer, whatever you need to check. The only contact I've had with her was when she showed up at my house 3 nights ago uninvited. I gave her the information about where her belongings are stored and asked her to leave." "She mentioned that incident. She says you were hostile and threatening." "There's video of the entire conversation. Her friends recorded it and posted it online. You can see exactly what happened." There was a pause. "I'll need to review that footage. In the meantime, I want to make it clear that any further contact with Ms. Caldwell could result in charges being filed." "I have no intention of contacting her." "Good. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." The line went quiet, and I sat there holding my phone, trying to process what had just happened. Seren wasn't just trying to get back into my life, she was trying to destroy what was left of it. Tate was watching me with the expression of a man who'd seen enough combat to recognize when someone was under attack. "How bad?" he asked. "She filed a harassment complaint. Told the police I was threatening her and holding her stuff hostage. That's garbage, and you know it. Knowing it and proving it are 2 different things." My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Check your Google reviews." I opened the browser on my computer and searched for Brasken Automotive. The first thing I saw made my chest tighten. Overnight, 17 new 1-star reviews had appeared, all posted by accounts with generic names and no profile pictures. "Terrible service. Owner is unstable." "Don't trust this guy with your car or your safety." "Creepy behavior toward women customers." "Heard he stalks his ex-wife. Stay away." Every review followed the same pattern. Vague accusations about my character, warnings about my mental state, and suggestions that I was dangerous to be around. None of them mentioned specific incidents or services because none of them were written by actual customers. "She's smart," I said, more to myself than to Tate. "This isn't random revenge. This is a campaign." "What do you mean?" "Look at the timing. The police complaint, the canceled appointments, the fake reviews, it all happened within hours of each other. She's trying to destroy my business and my reputation at the same time." Tate leaned over my shoulder to read the reviews. "Can you get these taken down?" "Maybe, eventually. But the damage is already done. How many people do you think saw these before deciding to take their cars somewhere else?" The answer came in the form of 3 more phone calls over the next hour. 2 more cancellations and 1 existing customer asking if the rumors about my behavior were true. By 5 o'clock, I'd lost 7 appointments and my Google rating had dropped from 4.8 stars to 2.1. Seren had managed to do more damage to my business in one day than I'd suffered in the entire recession of 2008, but she'd also made a mistake. In her eagerness to hurt me, she'd left a trail that was easy to follow. The fake reviews all came from accounts created within the last 48 hours. The complaints to my customers had all mentioned the same phrases and talking points. And the police report she'd filed contained several statements that directly contradicted the video evidence her own friends had posted online. I called my lawyer, a guy named Pete Hoffman, who'd handled my divorce and specialized in the kind of small-town legal problems that didn't make the news but could ruin your life if you handled them wrong. "Lennon," he said when he picked up, "I heard there was some drama. You okay?" "I need to know my options. Seren's trying to destroy my business with fake reviews and false police reports." "Can you prove they're fake?" "I think so, but I need to know how far I can go to defend myself without making things worse." "Bring me everything you've got. Documents, screenshots, whatever evidence you can gather. We'll figure out how to fight back without giving her ammunition for more complaints." After I hung up, I sat in my empty shop and tried to figure out what Seren's endgame was. She'd already gotten her divorce, already moved on with her life. Why come back now? Why risk legal trouble just to hurt me? The answer came to me as I was locking up for the night. This wasn't about getting me back or even about revenge. This was about control. Seren had spent 3 years trying to change me into someone I wasn't, and when that failed, she'd left. But the fact that I was doing fine without her, that I wasn't broken or desperate or begging for another chance, that drove her crazy. She needed me to fail. She needed to be right about me being a loser who would never amount to anything. My success, even modest success, was a threat to the story she'd told herself about why she left. Well, I thought as I walked to my truck, if she wanted a fight, she'd pick the right guy. I'd spent 12 years building this business from nothing, and I wasn't about to let her tear it down with lies and fake reviews, but I was going to be smart about it, smarter than she was expecting. The war was just beginning. Saturday morning, I drove to the secure store facility on Hamilton Avenue to check on Seren's belongings. The sky was a flat, overcast gray, the kind that made everything feel muted and provisional, and the radio hummed low without holding my attention. I'd driven this route enough times that my hands knew the turns without thinking, but that morning every mile felt heavier, like I was moving towards something that had already decided how it would end. The storage unit I'd rented for her stuff was in the back corner of the complex. Unit 47. Climate-controlled and big enough for the designer furniture and expensive clothes she'd accumulated during our marriage. It was tucked away from the main drive, past a row of identical roll-up doors, the air smelling faintly of oil and dust. I remember choosing that unit because it felt secure, out of the way, a temporary solution that wouldn't require much thought. The lock was missing. The hasp hung open, naked and wrong, and for a second I just stood there, keys still in my hand, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. I found the facility manager, a guy named Rick, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than dealing with weekend customer problems. He was leaning against the counter in the small office, sipping lukewarm coffee, his eyes already tired of the conversation before it started. "Someone cut the lock off Unit 47 sometime yesterday," he told me, checking his clipboard. "Tenant showed up with a copy of the rental agreement and ID. Everything looked legitimate." He didn't look up when he said it, like this was just another line item in a long list of inconveniences. "Did she take everything?" "Most of it. Left some boxes, but the furniture's gone." He shrugged, the universal gesture of liability avoided. I walked back to the unit and looked inside. The concrete floor echoed faintly under my steps, the space suddenly too large for what remained. Seren had taken the valuable stuff, the leather couch, the dining room set, the artwork she'd insisted we needed to look sophisticated. The absence was almost louder than their presence had ever been, empty outlines where things used to define a life together. What remained were 3 cardboard boxes and a plastic storage container. They sat clustered near the back wall, forgotten, unimportant enough not to bother with. The boxes contained photo albums, old letters, and paperwork from our marriage, receipts, warranties, folded notes from vacations we'd promised ourselves we'd take again, normal stuff that people usually want to keep. But the plastic container was more interesting. It was scuffed and slightly cracked at one corner, the lid not snapped down all the way, as if someone had been in a hurry. Inside, I found a manila folder full of documents that Seren had apparently forgotten about. The folder was thick, edges worn soft, like it had been opened and closed many times. Bank statements from an account I'd never seen before, credit card bills for purchases I didn't remember, restaurants, hotels, withdrawals that didn't line up with anything she'd ever told me, and a series of printed emails between Seren and someone named D. Gordon 87 that went back 2 years, a full year before she'd left me. The paper smelled faintly of toner and dust, each page a quiet accusation. Dex Gordon, her ex-boyfriend, the one she'd said needed her more than I did. The name sat on the page like a bruise I hadn't realized was there. I sat down on the concrete floor of the storage unit and read through the emails. The chill seeped through my jeans, grounding me as I turned page after page. They started innocent enough, Dex reaching out to reconnect, Seren responding politely. Careful language, friendly tone, the kind of plausible deniability people hide behind. But by the 6th month, they were making plans to meet for coffee. By the 9th month, they were talking about their future together. By the 12th month, they were discussing how and when Seren should leave me. Logistics, timing, emotional preparation, all the things you don't plan unless you've already decided. I can't keep pretending to be happy, Seren had written in one email. Lennon's a good man, but he's not ambitious. He's content with his little garage and his small-town life. I want more than that. Reading my own life reduced to a dismissive paragraph made my throat tighten in a way I hadn't expected. Dex's response was exactly what she'd wanted to hear. You deserve someone who understands your dreams, someone who can give you the life you really want. It was tailored, practiced, the kind of reassurance that sounds profound until you see it repeated. But the most interesting email was from 3 weeks before Seren left me. I reread it slowly, the date stamped clearly at the top. In it, Dex mentioned that his business venture was running into financial problems and that he might need to borrow some money to keep things afloat. The quotation marks around borrow weren't mine. They were his. Don't worry about the money, Seren had replied. Once I'm free from this marriage, I'll have access to everything. We can figure it out together. Everything. The word echoed in my head, suddenly sharp. She'd been planning to take me for half of everything I'd worked to build, then use it to fund whatever scheme Dex was running. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. I photographed every document with my phone, then put everything back exactly where I'd found it. I stacked the papers neatly, closed the folder, snapped the lid back on the container. If Seren had forgotten about these papers, I wasn't going to remind her by taking them. On the drive back to town, I called Pete Hoffman and told him what I'd discovered. The road blurred past the windshield, my grip on the steering wheel steady despite the noise in my head. This changes things, he said. If you can prove she was planning to leave you for months while pretending to work on the marriage, it might be grounds to revisit the divorce settlement. I don't want her money, Pete. I just want her to stop trying to destroy my life. Sometimes the threat of losing money is the only thing that gets people's attention. Let me look into it. My next stop was the public library, where I spent 2 hours researching Dex Gordon and his business ventures. The quiet there felt deliberate, contained, a place built for uncovering truths without interruption. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Public records have a way of telling stories people assume are buried. Dex owned a gym called Iron Temple Fitness on the other side of town. Glossy photos online showed heavy equipment, motivational slogans, and smiling clients. According to the business registration records, he'd opened it 18 months ago with a loan from First National Bank. But according to the local newspaper's business section, Iron Temple had been struggling with membership numbers and had recently laid off half its staff. More interesting were the court records I found from Dex's previous business ventures. Each year painted a similar picture, different names, same pattern. In 2019, he'd been sued by investors in a protein supplement company that had gone bankrupt. In 2020, he'd settled out of court with former business partners who accused him of mismanaging funds. In 2021, he'd been investigated by the state attorney general's office for running an unlicensed investment scheme. Dex Gordon wasn't just Seren's ex-boyfriend. He was a con artist with a pattern of using other people's money to fund his failures. And Seren had been planning to be his next mark. I printed out everything I could find and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. Seren thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, but she'd underestimated how much information was available to someone who knew where to look and had the patience to dig. That evening, I got a call from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who lived 3 houses down and had the kind of curiosity that made her better than any security system. "Lennon, dear," she said, "I hope you don't mind me calling, but there was a woman parked outside your house this afternoon taking pictures. What did she look like?" "Blonde, maybe 35, driving a silver car. She was there for about an hour, just sitting and watching your place. I thought you should know." Seren was escalating. First the fake reviews and police complaints, now surveillance. She was building a case for something, though I wasn't sure what. I thanked Mrs. Patterson and hung up, then walked through my house, checking every window and door. Everything was secure, but I made a mental note to be more careful about my routines. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. Someone who knows what Seren is really up to. I could have ignored it. Should have ignored it, probably. But curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself typing, "I'll be there." Whatever game Seren was playing, it was about to get more complicated. Riverside Park. On a Sunday afternoon was the kind of place where families brought their kids to feed ducks and teenagers came to avoid their parents. I arrived at 2 p.m. sharp and found a bench near the pond where I could see anyone approaching from 3 directions. The person who showed up wasn't what I'd expected. Mara Hutchins, one of Seren's best friends and amateur videographers, walked across the grass toward me like she was heading to her own execution. She looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder, and when she sat down on the opposite end of the bench, she left enough space between us for 2 more people. "Thanks for coming," she said without looking at me. "You're the one who texted me?" "Yeah." She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. "I need to show you something, but first, you have to promise me you won't tell Seren where you got this." "Why would you help me? I thought you were on her side." Mara laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was on her side, right up until I figured out what she was really doing. She opened a video on her phone and handed it to me. The recording was obviously made in secret. The camera was positioned low, like it was hidden in a purse or bag, and the audio was muffled but clear enough to understand. On screen, I could see Seren and Dex sitting in what looked like a restaurant booth. The timestamp showed the video was recorded 4 days ago, the day after Seren's dramatic appearance at my house. "The whole thing was perfect," Seren was saying. "I looked pathetic, he looked like a heartless jerk, and we got it all on video. Mara and Kenzie did exactly what I told them to do." "And you're sure this will work?" Dex's voice was skeptical. "Trust me. I know Lennon better than anyone. He's proud, stubborn, and he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. When people start turning against him, when his business starts failing, he'll get desperate. That's when we make our move." "What kind of move?" "He'll want to fight back. He'll do something stupid, something that makes him look unstable or dangerous. And when he does, I'll have everything I need to take him for everything he's worth." Dex leaned back in his chair. "I still think this is unnecessarily complicated. Why not just move on?" "Because he embarrassed me," Seren said, her voice turning sharp. "That video of me standing on his porch like some desperate ex-girlfriend has been viewed over 200,000 times. People are laughing at me, Dex. They think I'm pathetic. So I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about Lennon Brasken, that he's a small-minded, vindictive man who can't handle rejection, that he's dangerous and unstable and not the victim everyone thinks he is." The video continued for another few minutes, with Seren outlining her plan to destroy my reputation and business, then use my inevitable reaction as evidence that I was unfit to keep the assets from our marriage. She wanted to go back to court, claim I'd hidden money or threatened her, and walk away with half of everything I'd built. When the video ended, I handed the phone back to Mara and sat in silence for a moment, processing what I'd just seen. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked finally. "Because I'm not a terrible person," Mara said. "I thought this was just about getting back together with you, maybe making you jealous or something. I didn't know she was planning to destroy your life." "But you went along with it. You filmed everything at my house." "She told me you'd been harassing her, that you were trying to make her life miserable and she needed evidence to protect herself. I believed her because she's my friend. Or I thought she was." Mara pulled out a cigarette and lit it with shaking hands. "But then I started paying attention to the things she was saying when she thought I wasn't listening, about how you deserved whatever happened to you, about how men like you needed to be taught lessons. It wasn't about justice or protection. It was about revenge. And Dex? Dex is broke. His gym is failing, he owes money to some very unpleasant people, and he's desperate. Seren convinced him that you had money hidden away, that if they played this right, they could get enough to solve all their problems. Do you know what their next move is? Mara took a long drag on her cigarette. They're going to try to provoke you into doing something stupid, probably something public that they can record and use against you. Seren thinks you're too proud to just ignore them, that you'll eventually snap and give them what they need. And if I don't snap, then they'll keep escalating until you do, or until they find another way to get what they want. I looked out across the pond, watching a family of ducks paddle around in circles. The simplicity of their existence seemed appealing compared to the mess my life had become. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, Mara said. I just wanted you to know what you were really dealing with. Seren's not some heartbroken ex-wife who made a mistake. She's a predator, and you're her target. She stood up and dropped her cigarette, crushing it under her heel. Be careful, Lennon. She's smarter than people give her credit for, and she's more ruthless than you remember. After Mara left, I sat on that bench for another hour, thinking about everything I'd learned. Seren wasn't just trying to hurt me, she was trying to destroy me systematically and methodically. The fake reviews, the police complaints, the surveillance, it was all part of a larger plan to provoke me into a reaction she could use against me. But knowing her strategy gave me an advantage she didn't expect. Instead of reacting emotionally, I could respond strategically. Instead of playing defense, I could go on offense. I pulled out my phone and called Pete Hoffman. Pete, it's Lennon. I need to see you first thing Monday morning, and I need you to bring someone who specializes in fraud cases. What kind of fraud? The kind where someone tries to manipulate the legal system to steal money they're not entitled to. How much evidence do you have? I thought about the emails I'd found, the video Mara had shown me, and the research I'd done on Dex's business history. Enough, I said. More than enough. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was back in control. Seren thought she was hunting me, but she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd forgotten that mechanics are really good at taking things apart. Monday morning came with the kind of clarity that follows a storm. I met with Pete Hoffman and his associate, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, who specialized in what she politely called matrimonial fraud cases. By noon, we had a strategy that was both legal and devastating. The first step was easy. I filed a formal complaint with the police about the fake Google reviews, providing evidence that 17 accounts had been created within 48 hours specifically to target my business. I also submitted the video evidence that contradicted Seren's harassment claims. The second step was more satisfying. Rebecca filed a motion to reopen my divorce case based on newly discovered evidence of fraud and concealment. The emails I'd found proved that Seren had been planning to leave me for over a year while pretending to work on our marriage, and that she'd been coordinating with Dex to maximize her financial gain from the divorce. But the third step was the one that would end this permanently. I called the number that had texted me about meeting at the park and waited for Mara to answer. It's Lennon, I said when she picked up. I need another favor. I already told you everything I know. Not everything. I need you to get Seren and Dex to meet me somewhere public, somewhere they'll feel safe enough to talk freely. Why would I do that? Because if this goes to court, you're going to be called as a witness, either as someone who helped expose their fraud or as someone who participated in it. Your choice. There was a long pause. What do you want me to do? Tell them I want to make a deal. Tell them I'm tired of fighting and I'm willing to negotiate. Suggest the Riverside Diner on Thursday night. It's public, neutral ground, and they'll think they have the advantage. And then what? Then I end this, once and for all. Thursday evening, I arrived at the Riverside Diner 15 minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner where I could see the entire restaurant. I'd been coming to this place since I was a kid, and the owner, Jimmy Kowalski, was an old friend of my father's. More importantly, Jimmy had agreed to let me set up a small recording device at my table, perfectly legal in our state as long as one party to the conversation consented to the recording. Seren and Dex arrived exactly on time, looking like they were dressed for a business meeting rather than a conversation with an ex-husband. Seren wore a black dress that probably cost more than most people's car payments, and Dex had squeezed himself into a suit that was trying very hard to hide the fact that his gym wasn't the only thing that was failing. They slid into the booth across from me, and Seren immediately took control of the conversation. Lennon, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm glad you reached out. This whole situation has gotten so unnecessarily complicated. Has it? I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Of course it has. We're both adults. We should be able to work this out without involving lawyers and police and all this drama. Dex leaned forward. Seren told me you might be willing to discuss a settlement, something that would be fair to everyone involved. What did you have in mind? Seren smiled, and for a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen for her in the first place. She could be charming when she wanted something, magnetic in a way that made you forget how dangerous she was. Well, she said, I think we both know that our divorce settlement wasn't entirely fair. You kept the business, the house, most of the assets. I walked away with almost nothing. You walked away with exactly what you agreed to in writing. I was emotionally compromised. I wasn't thinking clearly about my financial future. And now you are? Now I have perspective? And I think if we went back to court, a judge might see things differently, especially given some of the concerning behavior you've displayed recently. There it was, the threat I'd been expecting. What concerning behavior? Dex took over, his voice carrying the kind of casual menace that probably worked well in his failing gym. Come on, man. The harassment, the stalking, the fake social media accounts you've been using to spread lies about Seren. We have documentation of everything. Do you? We have witnesses, Seren added. People who've seen your behavior firsthand. People who are willing to testify about your mental state and your threats. I nodded slowly, as if I was considering their words. And what would it take to make all of this go away? Serene's eyes lit up. A revised settlement, something more equitable. Say, 60% of the business value, the house, and a monthly support payment for the next 5 years. That's essentially everything I own. That's the price of avoiding a very public, very embarrassing court battle, Dex said. Trust me, you don't want this to go to trial. I sat back in the booth and looked at them both. Seren was practically glowing with anticipation, convinced that she'd finally backed me into a corner. Dex was trying to look tough, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. They needed this to work because they were out of other options. You know, I said finally, you're absolutely right about one thing. I don't want this to go to trial. Serene's smile widened. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Which is why I've already filed a motion to reopen our divorce case based on fraud. The smile disappeared from her face like someone had flipped a switch. What are you talking about? Dex demanded. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I'm talking about the emails you two exchanged for over a year before Seren left me. The ones where you planned exactly how and when she should end our marriage to maximize her financial gain. Seren's face had gone completely pale. You're bluffing. I'm talking about the video recording of you two discussing how to manipulate me into doing something stupid so you could use it against me in court. Now Dex looked sick. What video? The one where Seren explains how she deliberately came to my house in the rain to look pathetic on camera, hoping to provoke a reaction she could use against me. The one where you discuss using my inevitable breakdown to justify taking everything I've worked for. I leaned forward. The one where you both admit that this entire harassment campaign was premeditated fraud designed to manipulate the legal system. Seren tried to recover. That's taken out of context. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can. See, the thing about being a mechanic is that you learn to be thorough. When something's broken, you don't just look at the obvious problem. You dig deeper, you check all the connections, you make sure you understand how all the pieces fit together. I pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table between us. Bank records showing Dex's debts and failed business ventures. Court documents from his previous fraud cases. Financial records proving that Seren transferred money from our joint accounts to pay for Dex's legal fees. Phone records showing hundreds of calls between you two during the last year of our marriage. Dex started to stand up. We don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, because in about 10 minutes, Detective Santos is going to arrive with warrants for both of your arrests. Fraud, conspiracy, filing false police reports, and about 6 other charges that my lawyer was very excited to explain to me. Seren's voice was barely a whisper. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything. You did this to yourselves when you decided to try to destroy an innocent person for money. I stood up and put on my jacket. The recording device on this table has captured everything you've said tonight, including your admission that you've been running a deliberate campaign to defraud me. That recording is already in the hands of my attorney and the district attorney's office. I looked down at both of them, sitting there in shock, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete peace. You wanted to know what kind of man I really am, I said. Well, now you know. I'm the kind of man who doesn't get mad, I get even, and I'm very, very good at it. I left them sitting in that booth and walked out of the diner into the cool evening air. Through the window, I could see them arguing in frantic whispers, probably trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage their plan. There wasn't. By the time I got home, Detective Santos had called to let me know that both Seren and Dex had been arrested. The charges would likely result in significant jail time, especially for Dex, who had multiple prior convictions. I poured myself a drink and sat on my front porch, looking out at the quiet street where I'd built my life. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work fixing cars and helping people solve real problems. The fake reviews would be removed, the harassment would stop, and my reputation would recover. Seren had been right about one thing. I was the kind of man who didn't give up easily, but she'd been wrong about everything else. I wasn't small-minded or vindictive or dangerous. I was just someone who believed that actions should have consequences, and that people who try to destroy innocent lives should face justice for their choices. The rain started falling again, washing the last traces